When a mail-order bride is cruelly abandoned for being infertile, she finds unexpected love with the county's wealthiest widower, who sees her true worth beyond what others believe. In The Worth of Promise, will Emma's newfound happiness survive when the man who rejected her returns seeking vengeance? The train screeched to a halt, sending a flock of startled crows into the gray October sky. Emma Blackwood's heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched her carpet bag, everything she owned in the world packed into one shabby container. The whistle gave one final wail, like an animal dying, before silence settled over Millbrook Station. This was it. After 28 years in Boston, after burying both parents, after watching friends marry and start families while she remained alone, she had finally taken the desperate leap, becoming a mail-order bride to a stranger in a frontier town. "Last stop, Millbrook," shouted the conductor, his voice rough from years of competing with the train's roar. Emma smoothed her travel-worn dress, her best one, save for this moment, and touched the wedding band hanging from a ribbon around her neck. Too large for her finger, it had belonged to her mother. Something old, something borrowed. The rest of the saying didn't matter now. The station platform felt unsteady beneath her feet as she stepped down from the train, or perhaps it was just her trembling legs. Coal smoke stung her eyes, mixing with the earthy smell of approaching rain. 3 months of letters had led to this moment, to meeting Thomas Grayson, the wheat farmer who had written with such practical kindness about building a life together. Emma scanned the small crowd, searching for a man matching the description from his letters, tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard the color of wheat at harvest. But as passengers dispersed into waiting arms of family or trudged toward the small town visible beyond the station, no one approached her. Instead, a freckled boy appeared, cap clutched respectfully in dirty hands. "Miss Blackwood?" he asked, shifting from foot to foot like he needed to visit an outhouse. "Yes." Hope flickered. Perhaps Thomas had sent a welcome party. "Mr. Grayson asked me to deliver this." The boy thrust a folded paper at her and stepped back quickly, as if she carried some disease. Emma's fingers felt numb as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was hasty, angry, nothing like the careful script from the letters. "The arrangement is terminated. Your condition was not disclosed. Return fare enclosed." Tucked inside was money for a train ticket east. Emma's vision blurred as rain began to fall, drops hitting the paper and making the ink run. Her condition, the doctor's word echoed in her mind, barren, empty, worthless. "Miss," the boy hovered nearby. "There's another eastbound train tomorrow at 8. Mr. Grayson said to tell you." A crack of thunder made them both jump. The station had emptied now, leaving Emma alone with her shame as rain began to fall harder, plastering her travel cape to her shoulders. "Is there somewhere I can stay tonight?" she asked, forcing strength into her voice. "Golden Pine takes travelers," the boy replied, pointing toward the town's main street. "Just follow the road. Can't miss it." Emma squared her shoulders, gripping her bag tighter. She would not cry. Not here, not where anyone could see. She had wept enough when her first engagement ended 3 years ago, when Richard called off their wedding after consulting with his family doctor about her female troubles. "Thank you," she told the boy, pressing a penny into his palm, one of her precious few coins remaining after spending nearly everything on this journey west. As she walked toward town, mud sucking at her boots and rain soaking through her clothes, Emma felt the weight of rejection crushing down harder than her sodden garments. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles only to be dismissed without even a face-to-face meeting. The cruelty of it stole her breath. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the town ahead. A collection of wooden buildings straddling the muddy main street, a church steeple rising above the others like a finger pointing accusingly at heaven. Emma's steps slowed as thunder growled again. What now? Return east with her tail between her legs? To what? Her parents' modest home had been sold to pay debts. Her friends were all married with children, their lives revolving around a world she could never fully join. A wagon rumbled past, splashing mud onto her skirts. The driver didn't even glance her way, just another drenched stranger in a town that wasn't expecting her anymore, wasn't wanting her. The Golden Pine appeared ahead, its windows glowing with warm lamplight. Emma paused beneath the sagging porch roof, water streaming from her bonnet. Through the window, she could see people gathered around a fire, laughing, belonging. She touched her flat stomach, the source of her shame, and made a decision. She would not return east. Not tomorrow. Not yet. She had exactly $8.43 remaining after the train fare, enough for a few nights' lodging while she figured out what came next. The door creaked as Emma pushed it open, conversation dying as heads turned toward her. Mud splattered, soaked to the skin, clutching her pathetic carpet bag. She knew what they saw. A woman alone. A woman unwanted. But they didn't know what else she was. Stubborn. Educated. Capable. Her father's daughter, who had kept books for his tailoring shop since she was 12. Who could read Latin and speak French and add columns of numbers in her head. Emma lifted her chin, water dripping from her bonnet onto the rough wooden floor of the inn. "I need a room," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "And information about work in Millbrook." In the corner, a man looked up from his newspaper, his eyes the clear blue of winter sky. Unlike the others, his gaze held no judgment, only curiosity. Emma didn't know it then, but she had just met Ethan Montgomery, the owner of half the county, and the man who would change everything. 25 cents a night, or $1.50 for the week, announced Mrs. Hattie Wilson, slapping an iron key onto the counter. The innkeeper's hands were red and chapped from lye soap, her apron spotted with grease. She squinted at Emma's dripping figure. That includes breakfast, but nothing else. The common room of the Golden Pine Inn fell silent. Every eye watched the exchange, the strange woman's arrival more interesting than cards or whiskey on this stormy night. Emma felt their stares like physical touches as she dug into her small coin purse. "A week, please," she said, pushing wet hair from her face. She couldn't afford to waste money on daily rates. Mrs. Wilson's eyebrows shot up. "Thought you'd be heading back east tomorrow." Emma froze. "How did you?" "Millbrook has 3 streets and 200 people," Mrs. Wilson snorted, scooping up Emma's coins. "News travels faster than the rain. You're Thomas Grayson's mail-order bride, the one he sent away before even meeting you." Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. A man at the nearest table chuckled, nudging his companion. "Rooms upstairs, last door on the right," Mrs. Wilson continued, lowering her voice. "Don't mind the talk. Happens more than you'd think. Grayson sent back 2 others this year alone." "2 others?" Emma whispered. First one was too skinny. Claimed she wouldn't survive the winter. Second talked back too much. Mrs. Wilson's eyes softened slightly. "What was your crime?" Emma clutched her carpet bag tighter. "I can't have children." The innkeeper's expression shifted, not to pity, which Emma dreaded, but to something harder, angrier. "Men," she muttered, "want us silent as statues till they want heirs. Then suddenly it's all our fault." She pulled a towel from under the counter. "Here, dry yourself before you catch your death." The common room had returned to its previous noise level, Emma's drama already forgotten in favor of card games and gossip. She dabbed at her face, suddenly aware of how she must look. Hair plastered to her skull, mud spattered him. She was squelching with every step. "I need work," she said, keeping her voice low. "I can't afford to stay without income." Mrs. Wilson's shrewd eyes assessed her. "Can you cook?" "Simple meals, yes." "Good with numbers?" "Very. I kept books in my father's shop for years." Mrs. Wilson nodded slowly. "Might be something." The door banged open, cutting off her words. Wind and rain gusted in along with a tall figure in an oilskin coat. The room fell instantly silent. Not the curious quiet that had greeted Emma, but something deeper, more respectful, tinged with fear. The newcomer removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked dark hair and a face weathered from sun and wind rather than age. His eyes, clear blue as a winter morning, took in the room in one sweeping glance, lingering momentarily on Emma. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I need rooms prepared for Clayton Brothers. They're arriving tomorrow to discuss the railway spur." "Of course, Mr. Montgomery," the innkeeper replied, suddenly formal. "The suite is ready." Emma noticed a black band on the man's sleeve, faded but still visible. A widower, then, and clearly someone important, judging by how the room's occupants straightened in their chairs. His gaze returned to Emma, taking in her bedraggled state without judgment. New arrival? Just passing through, Emma answered before Mrs. Wilson could respond, unwilling to have her humiliation announced to yet another stranger. Something flickered in the man's expression, not pity, but a kind of recognition that made Emma stand straighter despite her sodden clothes. "Millbrook needs new blood," he said simply. "Safe travels if you continue on. Good night, Mrs. Wilson." He departed as abruptly as he'd arrived, leaving behind a silence that lasted several heartbeats before conversation cautiously resumed. Emma caught whispers. Montgomery, timber contract, railway, wealthiest man. "Who is he?" she asked Mrs. Wilson. "Ethan Montgomery. Owns a timber operation that keeps this town alive." Mrs. Wilson tapped the key. "Also owns the bank, the general store building, and most of the farmland worked by folks like Thomas Grayson." Emma digested this information. "And the morning band?" "Lost his wife 2 years back. Childbirth fever. Left him with a daughter to raise alone." Mrs. Wilson sighed. "He's a fair employer, unlike some. Pays on time, doesn't dock wages without cause. If you're serious about staying—" "I am," Emma said firmly. "His bookkeeper left last month, headed for the gold fields in Montana." Mrs. Wilson handed Emma a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Dry clothes. My daughter's before she married. She was about your size. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, I'll show you where the timber office is." The narrow staircase creaked under Emma's weight as she climbed to her room. It was small but clean, a bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a chip basin, a three-legged stool, and a window overlooking the rain-slicked Main Street. Better than many places she'd slept during her journey west. After changing into the borrowed nightgown, she sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds. The settling of an old building, distant laughter from the common room below, the howl of what might be coyotes or wolves in the hills beyond town. For the first time since opening Thomas Grayson's note, Emma allowed herself to weep, not the quiet tears of public dignity, but harsh, ugly sobs that racked her body. She cried for the home she'd left behind, for the hope she'd foolishly nurtured during those months of correspondence, for the cruel rejection that had awaited her. When the storm of emotion passed, Emma wiped her face on a rough towel and stood on shaky legs. The small mirror above the washstand reflected a woman she barely recognized. Pale, hollow-eyed, hair a tangled mess. But something had shifted inside her. The shame that had followed her since the doctor's verdict 3 years ago, barren, no children possible, was beginning to transform into anger. Who was Thomas Grayson to judge her worth? Who was anyone? Emma pressed a hand against her flat stomach, the part of her that had betrayed her, that had cost her 2 chances at marriage. But it wasn't all of her. She had a mind that could calculate faster than most men. She had hands that could work. She had determination born from surviving loss. Through the thin walls, she heard a child's laughter from a nearby room, bright, innocent, followed by a woman's hushing tones. A normal family moment that would never be hers. Or would it? Perhaps there were other ways to build a life. Emma moved to the window, watching lightning illuminate the muddy street below. 2 men stumbled from the saloon across the way, supporting each other in drunken camaraderie. A dog barked somewhere nearby, and at the far end of the street, a lamp still burned in the window of what she guessed was a timber office, the largest building in sight. 2 stories of solid construction amid more humble structures. "Tomorrow," Emma whispered to her reflection, "I will not be asking for charity. I will be offering my skills." She touched the wedding band still hanging from the ribbon around her neck, her mother's ring, meant for a marriage that would never happen now. With sudden decision, she untied the ribbon and tucked the ring into her carpet bag. Some promises weren't meant to be kept, but others, promises to oneself, were the only ones that truly mattered. A shot rang out, startling a flock of crows from the rooftops as Emma hurried down Millbrook's busy Main Street. 2 angry men faced off on the muddy road, one clutching a bleeding arm. Emma ducked behind a water trough, heart hammering as the sheriff rushed to separate them. This wild town was nothing like Boston, nothing like the peaceful farm life Thomas Grayson had promised in his letters. The commotion faded as Emma approached the grandest building in town. The Montgomery Timber Office stood tall and proud, with real glass windows that sparkled in the morning sun. Emma paused to smooth her best blue dress, which she'd ironed until her arms ached. 7 days of scrubbing floors and serving greasy meals at the Golden Pine and had earned her enough coins to stay a little longer, but winter was coming. "You're really going through with this?" Mrs. Wilson had asked that morning, eyebrows raised as Emma practiced her introduction. "Montgomery needs someone smart with numbers. That's true. His last man ran off chasing gold dust dreams. But he doesn't hire women." "He hasn't met me yet," Emma had replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. Now, with her stomach twisted into knots, she raised her fist and knocked 3 times. The heavy door swung open to reveal a world that smelled of pine sap, leather-bound books, and strong coffee. A wall of maps showed forests, rivers, and mountain passes. Behind an enormous oak desk sat Ethan Montgomery himself, somehow looking even taller than he had at the inn. Their eyes met, and a flash of recognition crossed his face. "Sir, I've come about the bookkeeper position," Emma said quickly before her courage failed. His eyebrows shot up. "Then ladies' refugee. I figured you'd be halfway back to Boston by now." "Plans change," Emma said, lifting her chin. She wouldn't mention Thomas Grayson or his cruel rejection. "I understand you need someone who knows figures." Ethan Montgomery didn't invite her to sit. Instead, he studied her as if she were a puzzling entry in one of his ledgers. "This isn't a city drawing room, Miss Blackwood. Emma Blackwood. Miss Blackwood. Life here is rough. The weather turns mean. The work never ends. Most Easterners who drift and drift right back out when the first blizzard hits." Emma met his gaze without blinking. "I didn't travel 2,000 miles to turn back at the first difficulty, Mr. Montgomery. My plans may have shifted, but my determination hasn't." Something flickered in his ice-blue eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. He tapped his fingers on the desk, then suddenly pulled a thick, leather-bound book from a stack and pushed it toward her. "Last month's timber contracts. Full of mistakes. Show me what you'd fix." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she opened the ledger. The familiar columns of numbers settled her nerves. For the next 40 minutes, she lost herself in the work, forgetting her precarious situation as she spotted errors, suggested better tracking methods, and reorganized messy entries. When she finally looked up, Ethan Montgomery was watching her with surprised approval. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. "My father's hardware business. After Mother died, I kept his books for 6 years until his heart failed." She closed the ledger. "He always said I had a better head for numbers than his mail clerks, though he only admitted it at home." Ethan rubbed his bearded jaw. "Grayson's a bigger fool than I thought," he muttered, half to himself. Heat rushed Emma's face. So he knew about her failed arrangement after all. The shame of it burned in her throat. Before she could respond, the office door crashed open with a bang that made her jump. "Father," Mrs. Wilson told me. A small whirlwind in a green dress burst into the room, dark braids flying. The girl skidded to a stop when she spotted Emma, eyes widening with excitement. Is she the new counting person? Will she stay in the upstairs room? Can she come for supper? Ethan's stern face transformed instantly. "Miss Blackwood, meet my daughter Lily, the town's most curious 10-year-old. Lily dropped a wobbly curtsy, her bright eyes never leaving Emma's face. "Do you tell good stories?" Mr. Jenkins never told stories. He smelled like cabbage and said children asked too many questions. "Lily," her father warned gently. "I do know some stories," Emma admitted, charmed by the child's honesty, about princesses who rescue themselves and bears who learn to dance. Lily's face lit up like a lantern. "Father, she must come for supper. Mrs. Peterson made stew again, and it tastes like old boots." Ethan Montgomery cleared his throat. "Miss Blackwood hasn't even accepted the position yet." He looked at Emma, his expression unreadable. "The job is yours if you want it. Pay is $20 monthly, with the room above the office included. You'll start tomorrow. $20. Emma could barely hide her shock. It was twice what she'd expected. "I accept," she said quickly. As Lily chatted excitedly about showing Emma the hidden creek behind their house, where frogs sang at sunset, Emma noticed Ethan watching them with a curious expression. For just a moment, she wondered what it might be like to belong somewhere again, to have a purpose beyond merely surviving. When they left the timber office, Emma carried a heavy ledger under her arm and something even heavier in her chest. Not quite hope, but shy, cautious cousin. The sting of Thomas Grayson's rejection hadn't faded, but for the first time, it felt less like an ending and more like an unexpected doorway. What Emma didn't notice was a man watching from across the street. Thomas Grayson himself, his face darkening like a thundercloud as he saw her emerge from Montgomery's office. He crushed a cigarette under his boot heel and turned away, muttering words that made a passing woman clutch her shawl tighter and hurry past. The blizzard howled like a hungry wolf, rattling the windows of Emma's tiny room above the timber office. Snow piled higher than a man's head against the buildings, turning Millbrook into a ghost town of white. 6 weeks had passed since Emma had taken the bookkeeper position, and winter had wrapped the world in its icy grip. Emma wrapped her shawl tighter and added another log to her small stove. The room had transformed from a bare space into something resembling home. A patchwork quilt from the general store brightened the narrow bed. 3 precious books stood on a shelf she'd built herself. A blue china wash basin, her first real purchase with her own money, caught the golden light from her lamp. A sudden pounding at the door downstairs made her jump. Who would be out in such weather? She grabbed her lamp and hurried down the creaking stairs, fearing bad news. When she opened a heavy door, Ethan Montgomery stood there, snow crusted on his beard, holding a bundle wrapped in blankets. "Thank God you're here," he gasped, pushing past her. "Lily's burning with fever. Doc Parker's trapped across town with a birth. I didn't know where else to go." The blankets parted to reveal Lily's flushed face. The normally lively child lay limp in her father's arms, her breathing shallow and quick. "Bring her upstairs," Emma said, taking charge. "I'll heat water." Fear knotted Emma's stomach as she helped Ethan lay Lily on her bed. The child's skin burned against her palm. How long had she been like this? "Started this morning with a cough," Ethan said, his voice tight with worry. His usual confidence had vanished, replaced by the raw fear of a father who might lose his only child. By afternoon, she couldn't stand. Mrs. Peterson tried her remedies, but nothing worked. Emma dampened a cloth and placed it on Lily's forehead. "My mother nursed me through scarlet fever when I was 8, she said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. "We need to cool her body slowly and get her to drink." Through the howling night, they fought the fever together. Emma mixed honey with the juice of lemons she'd been saving for Christmas. She crushed willow bark for tea. She changed cool compresses as Ethan held his daughter's tiny hand, whispering stories of brave princesses who defeated evil spells. "Don't leave me, too," he murmured when he thought Emma couldn't hear. "Not like your mother." Near dawn, when the storm finally quieted, Lily's fever broke. Her eyes fluttered open as weak sunlight filtered through frosted windows. "Miss Emma?" she whispered. "Did the snow princess come?" Relief flooded Emma's body, leaving her lightheaded and exhausted. "She did," she said, smoothing the child's damp hair. She chased away the fever sprites. Ethan's eyes met Emma's over his daughter's head. The gratitude and something deeper in his gaze made her look away first. "You should rest," she told him. "Both of you. I'll make soup." Later that afternoon, with Lily sleeping peacefully, Emma stood by the window watching the town emerge from its white cocoon. Townspeople dug pathways between buildings. Children already built snow forts in the street. "You saved her life." Ethan's voice came from behind her. Emma turned. Any mother would have done the same. "But you're not her mother." He stepped closer. "Why do you care so much for a child not your own?" The question hung between them like icicles from the eaves, dangerous and beautiful at once. "Because she matters," Emma said simply. "Because she sees me, not what I lack." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. "What do you mean, what you lack?" Emma's heart froze. She'd said too much, but exhaustion had lowered her guard, and the words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Thomas Grayson rejected me, Because I cannot have children. The doctor in Boston was very clear. Something is wrong inside me. She turned back to the window, unable to watch disappointment cloud his eyes. That's why I was alone at the station. That's why I stayed in Millbrook. Silence stretched between them, broken only by Lily's soft breathing from a bed. "Look at me, Emma," Ethan finally said. She turned reluctantly, bracing for pity or revulsion. Instead, his face showed only gentle understanding. "Catherine and I tried for years to have more children after Lily. We couldn't." The doctor said something similar. Emma's breath caught. "I didn't marry Catherine for her ability to bear children," he continued. "I married her because she made me laugh. Because she was smarter than me. Because she saw good in people when I saw only business opportunities." He took a step closer. "Grayson wanted a brood mare, not a wife. He stopped, seeming to realize how forward he sounded. A knock at the door saved them both from the dangerous moment. Sheriff Barnes stood outside with Doc Parker, finally freed from his other patient. As December deepened, Emma found herself more often at the Montgomery house than her own room. Recovering from her illness, Lily begged for Emma's stories and lessons. The child adopted her as a combination of teacher, friend, and something more tender neither of them named. Tonight, Emma sat by the massive stone fireplace, helping Lily with multiplication tables, while Ethan pretended to read his newspaper. She could feel his gaze drifting to them from time to time, watching their heads bent together over the slate board. "Miss Emma," Lily said suddenly, "will you spend Christmas with us? Father promised a real pine tree with candles, and Mrs. Peterson is making plum pudding even though she's terrible at sweets." Emma's hand froze on Lily's dark braid. The invitation touched something deep inside her, a longing for belonging she thought long dead. "I'm sure your father has family traditions." "None that exclude you," Ethan interrupted, lowering his paper. "Unless you made other plans?" The fire crackled and popped in the silence that followed. Emma studied his face, trying to read what lay behind the invitation. These past weeks had created something between them, a fragile bridge of understanding she barely dared to cross. "I would be honored," she finally said. Later, as they walked to the starbright cold to her lodgings, their breath formed silver clouds in the freezing air. "Catherine loved nights like this," Ethan said unexpectedly. She claimed the snow made everyone equal, covering ugly and beautiful things under the same clean blanket. He stopped walking, turning to face Emma. "Lily has her mother's eyes, but your kind heart. You brought something back to our home that I thought was gone forever." "She makes it easy," Emma admitted. "I never expected to find." She trailed off, unsure how to name the sense of purpose she discovered in their company. Ethan reached out, brushing a snowflake from her cheek with his gloved finger. The simple touch sent warmth spiraling through her body despite the bitter cold. "Whatever twist of fate brought you to Millbrook," he murmured, "I find myself grateful for it." As she watched him disappear into the swirling snow, Emma pressed her palm against her chest, feeling her heart's foolish hope. The connection growing between them was built on shared respect and understanding, but also on her silence about the true reason for Thomas's rejection. Ethan knew she couldn't have children, but not the shameful details of her abandonment at the station. That night, as she mended a tear in her woolen shawl, the needle slipped and pricked her finger. A bright drop of blood welled up, staining her white handkerchief. The sight reminded her of Thomas Grayson's cruel parting words. Your condition was not disclosed. What would happen when the truth emerged, as secrets always did in small towns? Emma had started building a life here, perhaps even the whisper of a future, but its foundation rested on shifting sand. Sooner or later, the tide would turn, washing away the fragile happiness she'd found. From her window, Emma could see lights still burning in the saloon across town. A man stumbled out into the snow, Thomas Grayson himself, drunk again. He looked up, as if sensing her watching, his face twisted with bitterness even at this distance. He spat in the snow and staggered away. Emma closed her curtains against the night, but couldn't shut out the feeling that her past and future were on a collision course that would leave nothing standing its wake. The door of the general store jingled as Emma stepped inside, snow melting from her boots onto the worn floorboards. Outside, Fat white flakes tumbled from a steel-gray sky, coating Millbrook in a fresh blanket that hid the town's muddy edges. She fumbled with her coin purse, counting carefully. Christmas was coming, and she wanted gifts for both Lily and Ethan. Well, look who's here. A sharp voice cut through the warm store air. Montgomery's charity case. Emma's fingers tightened around her coins. 3 women stood by the fabric counter, watching her with undisguised curiosity. Mrs. Collins, the banker's wife, her sister, Miss Perkins, and worst of all, Mrs. Grayson, Thomas's mother. "Good afternoon, ladies," Emma replied with a stiff nod. Mrs. Grayson sniffed. "Going to the Montgomery Christmas party? Everyone who matters has been invited." Emma's cheeks burned. She hadn't known about any party. "Excuse me," she murmured, moving toward the toy section where a wooden horse caught her eye. "Perfect for Lily. $6, the shopkeeper said when she brought it to the counter. Emma bit her lip. That would leave little for Ethan's gift. "Put on a Montgomery account," Mrs. Grayson called out, her voice honey-sweet with poison underneath. After all, that's what she's really after, isn't it? Access to his money. Emma placed her coins on the counter with shaking hands. "I'll pay with my own earnings, thank you." Outside again, snow swirling around her, Emma clutched her purchase and gulped cold air that stung her lungs. 3 months in Millbrook, and still she was an outsider, the mail-order bride nobody wanted, now cozying up to the richest man in the county. "Miss Blackwood." Lily's voice rang out across the snowy street. The girl dashed toward her, dark braids flying, face bright with excitement. "You simply must come home with me now. We're decorating the tree, and Father says we can't finish without you." Emma's heart swelled at the pure welcome in the child's voice. "I wouldn't miss it," she said, taking Lily's mittened hand. The Montgomery house glowed with golden light. Windows steamed against the winter chill. Inside, the scent of pine and cinnamon wrapped around Emma like a warm embrace. A massive tree dominated the parlor, its branches awaiting decoration. "You came," Lily exclaimed, pulling Emma toward the tree. "Father worried the snow might keep you away." Ethan appeared from his study, more relaxed than Emma had ever seen him, his customary waistcoat replaced by a soft woolen sweater. "I merely expressed concern about the weather," he corrected with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. As they hung ornaments on the tree, delicate glass balls Ethan had ordered from back east, alongside paper stars Lily had crafted. Emma found herself studying Ethan when he wasn't looking. The strong line of his jaw, softened now in laughter. The way his hands, so capable and strong, gently steadied Lily as she reached for higher branches. "I heard about the party," Emma said quietly when Lily dashed off to find more decorations. Ethan's face darkened. The bank's annual Christmas gathering. A tedious affair. Mrs. Grayson seemed to think it important. "Mrs. Grayson," Ethan said dryly, "believes many things that aren't true, including the notion that I would attend without you." Emma's heart skipped. "You wanted to go? As my guest," he finished. His eyes held hers. "Unless you prefer another title." The air between them crackled with possibility. Before Emma could respond, Lily returned, breaking the moment. The evening flowed like honey, a meal filled with laughter, carols around a piano Ethan played with surprising skill, popcorn strung into garlands for the tree. When Lily finally dozed off against Emma's shoulder, Ethan carried her upstairs, returning with 2 glasses of spice cider that warmed Emma's hands. "I have something for you," he said, voice low as he handed her a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside nestled a delicate silver chain bearing a pendant, a small key of intricate design. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, tracing the tiny teeth with her fingertip. "It was my grandmother's," Ethan explained, taking it gently from her hands. She called it her key to possibility. "May I?" Emma turned, lifting her hair. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin at her nape as he fastened the clasp, lingering a moment longer than necessary. When she faced him again, his eyes had darkened. "Emma," he began, voice rough, "I know this may seem sudden, but these past months," he took her hand, his thumb drawing small circles on her palm. "You've brought light back into this house, into my life." The pendant weighed heavy against her throat. "Ethan, there's something you should know," she interrupted. the words bitter on her tongue. If it's about Grayson and why he sent you away, I already know. Emma's breath caught. You know, this is a small town. People talk. His expression remained gentle. If you're worried I care about such things, please don't be. My feelings for you have nothing to do with. I can't have children, Emma blurted. The words hung between them like icicles, sharp and cold. I will never be able to give you more children. That's why Thomas rejected me. Why my fiancé in Boston did the same. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Emma waited for the familiar disappointment to cloud his eyes, for the careful withdrawal she'd seen twice before. Instead, Ethan raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her palm. I have Lily, he said simply. I have all I need in that regard. What I've been missing is a partner. Someone to share this life with. Tears blurred Emma's vision. But what will people say? People can go to the devil, Ethan said with unexpected fire. I've spent too many years letting others' expectations rule my life. Catherine taught me the value of choosing my own path. As he drew her into his arms, Emma felt the protective wall around her heart begin to crack. His lips found hers in a kiss that tasted of cider and possibility. Outside, snow fell faster, transforming the world. Would you consider becoming my wife? He murmured against her hair. Joy bubbled up in Emma's chest, bright and terrifying. Before she could answer, a sharp knock at the front door startled them apart. Mr. Montgomery. A boy's voice, urgent. Come quick. There's trouble at the saloon. Mr. Grayson's back from his hunting trip, drunk and threatening to burn down your lumber mill. As Ethan grabbed his coat, Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow blowing in through the open door. Thomas was not a man who accepted defeat easily, especially from a woman he saw as damaged goods. And now, just as happiness seemed within reach, he had returned to Millbrook with a vengeance that threatened everything. Flames licked the night sky, turning falling snow to instant steam. The lumber mill storage shed blazed like a massive torch, casting dancing shadows across the horrified faces of Millbrook citizens who had rushed to form a bucket line from the frozen creek. More water, Ethan shouted, his face streaked with soot, sleeves rolled up despite the biting cold. We must save the main building. Emma passed buckets with burning arms, her holiday dress ruined by smoke and dirty snow. Across the chaotic scene, through swirling sparks and steam, she spotted Thomas Grayson watching from the shadows, a whiskey bottle dangling from his fingers. Their eyes locked. He smiled. He did this, she whispered to herself. A timber beam crashed inside the shed, sending a fountain of embers skyward. Men shouted as the fire leapt higher. Emma dropped her bucket and raced toward where she'd seen Thomas, skirts gathered in her fists, but he had vanished into the darkness beyond the firelight. By dawn, only smoking ruins remained of the storage shed. The main mill stood intact, but blackened. Ethan, face grim with exhaustion, spoke quietly with Sheriff Davis, while Emma poured coffee for bone-tired men who had fought the blaze all night. Miss Emma, Lily tugged at her smoky skirt, eyes wide with worry. Is father in trouble? No, sweetheart. Emma smoothed the girl's tangled hair. But someone did a very bad thing last night. It was Mr. Grayson, wasn't it? Lily whispered. I heard the men talking. Emma glanced at the child, surprised by her perception. We don't know for sure. He's mean, Lily declared with a child's simple certainty. He says nasty things about you in town. Mrs. Peterson told me not to listen. Emma's heart squeezed. She hadn't realized Lily was aware of the whispers. Some people, she said carefully, get angry when they don't get what they want. But that doesn't make their anger right. Ethan approached, the set of his shoulders betraying his tension. Sheriff found empty whiskey bottles and boot prints matching Grayson's size near where fire started. Will he arrest him? Can't. Ethan's jaw tightened. No witnesses saw him light the fire, and his mother swears he was home all evening. 3 days later, Emma sat alone in the timber office, ledgers open before her unseeing eyes. The door creaked open, admitting a blast of cold air and the sharp scent of pine. Working late? Ethan asked, stamping snow from his boots. Just finishing these accounts. She closed the ledger. How was the bank meeting? Interesting. His tone made her look up. It seems Thomas Grayson has been telling stories about us, suggesting impropriety. Emma's stomach nodded. What kind of stories? That we knew each other before you came to Millbrook. That your arrangement with him was merely a cover. Ethan's expression darkened. That you're not the respectable woman you pretend to be. That's ridiculous. I never laid eyes on you until I was already here. I know that. Ethan pulled a chair close to hers. But Harrison at the bank is concerned about scandal. The Eastern investors are conservative men. Even rumors could damage business relationships. Emma's hands trembled. What are you saying? I'm saying, Ethan took her cold fingers between his warm ones, that Thomas Grayson is a spiteful man who's trying to punish us both. You for rejecting him, me for accepting you. Then perhaps we shouldn't. Emma couldn't finish the thought. Shouldn't what? Care for each other? Plan a future together? Ethan's eyes flashed. Is that what you want? I want you to be happy. The words burst from her. I don't want to be the reason your business suffers or Lily faces gossip at school. Then marry me. Ethan's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. Not in the spring, as we discussed. This week. Emma pulled her hand away. Because of Thomas? I won't be pushed into marriage by fear or spite. No. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, snow still fell, burying the town in whiteness. Because I've spent 2 years since Catherine died doing what was expected, maintaining appearances, running businesses, being the proper widower. For once, I want to choose happiness. My happiness. With you. The office door banged open without warning. Thomas Grayson filled the frame, his face flushed red from drink or cold or both. So it's true, he sneered, stomping snow from his boots. Montgomery's fancy woman keeps his books now. Emma set down her quill with deliberate calm, though her heart hammered wildly. Mr. Grayson, you're drunk. Please leave. He advanced into the room, looming over her desk. Does he know what damaged goods he's getting? He knows everything, Emma replied, rising to her feet. Now I'll ask you once more to leave. Thomas slammed his fist onto the desk, sending ink spattering across her careful figures. I paid good money to bring you out here, and I repaid every cent, Emma countered, gesturing toward the door. Our business is finished. His face twisted with ugly rage. You think you're good enough for Ethan Montgomery? The richest man in town taking up with a barren Boston spinster. He laughed cruelly. Even if he marries you out of pity, this town will never accept you. They know what you are. Each word struck like a physical blow, but Emma refused to flinch. What I am, she said quietly, is done with this conversation. She reached for the bell to summon help. Thomas grabbed her wrist, his grip crushing. Don't you walk away from me, woman. Take your hands off her. Ethan's voice cut through the room like ice. Thomas released Emma, but didn't back away. Just having a friendly chat with your bookkeeper, Montgomery, reminiscing about old arrangements. Miss Blackwood asked you to leave, Ethan said, his voice deceptively calm. I suggest you listen. Or what? You'll run me out of town. Thomas laughed bitterly. My family settled this valley before yours, Montgomery. You may own half the county now, but you don't own me. Ethan stepped closer, his face perfectly controlled. No, I don't. But I do own the land your farm sits on, the water rights you depend on, and the mortgage you've twice refinanced through my bank. His voice dropped dangerously. I also have considerable influence with the merchants you rely on for seed and equipment. How would you manage if they suddenly refuse your business? The color drained from Thomas's face. You wouldn't. For threatening the woman I love? Ethan's smile never reached his eyes. Try me. A heavy silence filled the room before Thomas spat on the floor and stormed out, shoulder-checking a clerk who had appeared in the doorway. When they were alone, Ethan crossed Emma, gently examining her wrists where angry red marks were already forming. I should have been here, he said, voice tight with guilt. Emma shook her head. I handled it. You shouldn't have had to. He traced the bruises with his fingertip. Emma, what he said, was just words, she finished, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Thomas had voiced the whispers that had followed her since Christmas, when Ethan's intentions became clear. Through the window, Emma watched the sun break through winter clouds, casting golden light across the snowy street. People moved about their business, some glancing curiously toward the timber office. This town had been her refuge when she had nowhere else to go. Now it felt like a battlefield. Emma. Ethan cupped her face gently between his hands. Marry me, not because of Thomas Grayson or gossip or business. Marry me because when I look at you, I see my future. I see possibilities I thought died with Catherine. Emma's throat tightened with unexpected tears. Looking into Ethan's clear eyes, she saw neither pity nor calculation, only love shining back at her. Yes, she whispered, but not rushed away like we have something to hide. I want to stand before this town proudly, with Lily beside us, and build our family in the light. As Ethan gathered her into his arms, Emma knew their battle had just begun. Marriage wouldn't end Thomas Grayson's spite or the town's judgment. But for the first time since arriving in Millbrook, Emma felt ready to fight, not just for survival, but for happiness she now believed she deserved. The church bells rang out across Millbrook, their sound stopping folks in their tracks. No one had expected Ethan Montgomery to marry the woman Thomas Grayson had rejected, but here they were, watching the couple emerge hand in hand into the February sunshine. Emma's cheeks glowed pink with happiness, while Ethan looked years younger, the grief that had shadowed him since his first wife's death finally lifting. Little Lily danced ahead of them, tossing dried flower petals that crunched beneath their boots in the snow. Look at them whispering, Emma murmured, noticing the clusters of townspeople gathered along the street. I wonder what they're saying. Nothing that matters, Ethan replied, squeezing her hand. Not anymore. Back at the Montgomery house, only 5 guests waited to celebrate with them. Mrs. Wilson had transformed the dining room with evergreen boughs and candles that filled the air with the scent of pine and honey. She'd baked a 3-layer cake decorated with crystallized violets she'd been saving since summer. First dance, Lily announced, pushing her father toward Emma while Dr. Parker cranked up the phonograph. As they swayed in the center of the parlor, Emma caught herself looking at the door, half expecting more guests to arrive. The invitations had gone out to 20 of the town's leading families. Only Mrs. Wilson and Dr. Parker had come. Stop counting who's missing, Ethan whispered against her ear. Count who's here instead. Emma looked around at the small circle of people who had accepted her, truly accepted her. Mrs. Wilson winked when their eyes met. Dr. Parker raised his glass in a silent toast, and Lily beamed at them both with such joy it made Emma's heart swell. A crash from outside startled them all. Ethan strode to the window and yanked back the curtain. Through the frosted glass, Emma saw 3 young men stumbling away, an overturned barrel rolling in the snow behind them. Just some foolishness, Ethan said, but his jaw had tightened. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and Lily was tucked into bed, Emma found a rock with a note tied around on the back porch. The paper carried just one word, barren. Her hands trembled as she crushed the note in her fist. She had expected cruelty, but the reality of it still stung. The sound of footsteps made her quickly toss both rock and paper into the snow. What are you doing out here without a shawl? Ethan asked, draping a blanket around her shoulders. Just getting some air, she lied, not wanting to spoil their wedding day with ugliness. That night, their first as husband and wife, Ethan led Emma to his bedroom. Now theirs. He'd had the heavy furniture polished and new curtains hung. On her pillow lay a small leather-bound book. What's this? She asked, picking it up. Open it. Inside, she found blank pages except for a single line written in Ethan's neat hand on the first page. The Story of Us by Emma and Ethan Montgomery. For our memories, he explained, the ones we'll make together. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she reached for him. In his arms, she discovered that love transformed everything it touched. Her body, which she had seen only as broken, became a source of joy rather than shame. For the first time, she felt whole. I never imagined it could be like this, she whispered afterward, their limbs tangled beneath the quilts. Like what? Ethan asked, stroking her hair away from her face. That I could feel... She searched for the right word. Complete. He kissed her forehead. You were always complete, Emma. You just needed to find people who could see it. The next morning, Emma woke to find Ethan already gone, a note on his pillow explaining he'd been called to the timber office for an emergency. She dressed quickly, looking forward to her first morning as the lady of the house. Downstairs, she found Lily already at the breakfast table with Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper. "Good morning, Mother," Lily chirped, the new title making Emma's heart skip. Mrs. Peterson barely nodded, setting down Emma's plate with a clatter. "Will there be anything else, ma'am?" Her tone made ma'am sound like an insult. "No, thank you," Emma replied evenly, determined not to let the woman's disapproval affect her. After breakfast, Emma decided to walk to town to purchase supplies for a special supper. Lily begged to come along, and they set off arm in arm, their breath making frosty clouds in the winter air. At the general store, conversation stopped when they entered. Mrs. Wilkinson, the shopkeeper's wife, disappeared into the back room rather than wait on them. Her husband approached reluctantly. "What can I help you with?" he asked, his eyes fixed somewhere over Emma's shoulder. "We need sugar and flour, please," Emma said with forced brightness. "And some of those cinnamon sticks if you have them." "For a special cake," Lily added, oblivious to the tension. Mr. Wilkinson gathered their items in silence. When it came time to pay, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Montgomery usually has an account with us," he said, "but I'll need to check if that extends to household purchases now." Emma felt her face flush. "I have cash," she said, placing coins on the counter. As they left the store, Emma noticed a group of women watching them from across the street, their heads bent together in conversation. One pointed, not bothering to hide her gesture. "Why are they staring?" Lily asked. Emma squeezed the girl's hand. "Sometimes people need time to get used to new things." "Like you being my mother?" "Yes, like that." They were halfway home when Thomas Grayson appeared, blocking their path. His eyes were bloodshot, his coat rumpled as if he'd slept in it. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. Montgomery and her ready-made family," he slurred. Emma pushed Lily behind her. "Please move aside, Mr. Grayson." "Did you tell her?" Thomas asked, looking at Lily. "Did you tell her why your father really married her? Because she can't give him more children like your mother did." "That's enough," Emma snapped, her fear giving way to anger. "You're drunk and speaking nonsense." "Am I?" He laughed bitterly. "Ask around town. Everyone knows Ethan Montgomery married damaged goods." Emma felt Lily's small hand slip into hers and squeeze hard. "My father says Mother is the strongest person he knows," the child said clearly, "and that people who can't see it aren't worth our time." Thomas's face darkened. He took a step toward them, but froze at the sound of horses approaching. Sheriff Miller pulled his wagon alongside them. "Everything all right here?" he asked, looking between Emma and Thomas. "Just fine, Sheriff," Emma replied. "Mr. Grayson was just leaving." Thomas glared but backed away. "This isn't over," he muttered before stalking off. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Mrs. Montgomery, might I offer you and Miss Lily a ride home?" "That would be very kind," Emma said, helping Lily up onto the wagon seat. As they rode, the sheriff cleared his throat. "Don't mind folks in town," he said gruffly. "They'll come around eventually." "And if they don't?" Emma asked. He shrugged. "Then they'll miss knowing a fine family." That evening, when Ethan returned home, Emma told him about the incidents in town. His face darkened with each word. "I'll speak to Wilkinson tomorrow," he said, "and file a complaint against Thomas." "No," Emma said firmly. "That will only make things worse. We need to show them who we are, not force them to pretend to accept us." Ethan looked at her with admiration. "When did you get so wise?" "When I stopped letting other people decide my value," she replied. Later, as they sat by the fire, Lily curled up between them with a book. Emma realized something important. This little circle of love was real and solid. Outside, the town might whisper and judge, but inside these walls, she had found true acceptance. Yet as she watched the flames dance, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas Grayson's parting words held a promise. This battle for respect was far from over, and the weeks ahead would test not just their love but their courage. Millbrook was still a small town with ironclad rules, and they had broken the biggest one of all. They had dared to define family on their own terms. Fire lit up the night sky over Millbrook, flames shooting 20 feet high as the Montgomery timber yard burned. Emma raced the crowd in her nightgown, a shawl hastily thrown over her shoulders. Her heart pounded with fear. Ethan had gone to check on a shipment hours ago and hadn't returned. "Where's my husband?" she shouted at Sheriff Miller, who was organizing a bucket line. "Inside, trying to save the records," he yelled back. Told him not to go in, but Emma didn't wait to hear more. She pushed through the crowd toward the burning office, only to be grabbed firmly by Mrs. Wilson. "You can't go in there," the innkeeper insisted, holding tight to Emma's arm. A thunderous crack split the air as part of the roof collapsed. Emma screamed Ethan's name, struggling against Mrs. Wilson's grip. Just when hope seemed lost, a figure emerged from the smoke, carrying a metal strongbox and coughing violently. "Ethan!" Emma broke free and ran to him as he stumbled forward. His face was black with soot, his coat singed, but he was alive. Dr. Parker rushed to help him as Emma supported him on one side. "Get him to my office," the doctor ordered. "The ledgers," Ethan rasped. "All gone. Everything we worked for." "Not everything," Emma whispered, pressing her cheek against the sooty one. "Not what matters most." At the doctor's office, while Ethan's burns retreated, Sheriff Miller delivered the news. The fire wasn't an accident. Someone had broken the office window and thrown in a lantern. "Any idea who want to hurt you like this?" the sheriff asked. Ethan and Emma exchanged a look. They both knew the answer. "Thomas Grayson's been missing since yesterday," Sheriff Miller added, reading their silence. "Left the Silver Dollar Saloon drunk and making threats." The news spread through town by morning. The timber yard, Millbrook's largest employer, lay in ruins. Families gathered on street corners, men worrying about jobs, women whispering behind hands. When Emma walked to the general store, people stopped talking and stared. Mrs. Montgomery. Mr. Wilkinson called from his doorway. A word. Emma braced herself for more coldness, but instead found concern in the shopkeeper's eyes. "The wife and I were wondering if you need anything," he said awkwardly. "Food. Supplies for Mr. Montgomery?" Surprised, Emma thanked him. Inside the store, Mrs. Wilkinson actually smiled at her. "Terrible business," she said, packing Emma's purchases. "Never thought Thomas would go this far. Always had a mean streak, but this..." As Emma left, she noticed other townspeople nodding to her, some even offering words of support. The same people who had snubbed her wedding were now united against a common enemy. At home, she found Ethan at his desk despite Dr. Parker's orders to rest. His right hand was bandaged, his face drawn with pain and worry. "The Eastern investors arrive tomorrow," he said without looking up. "Without the ledgers, without proof of our profits." "We'll figure it out," Emma promised, laying a hand on his shoulder. Together, that night, she couldn't sleep. Their future hung by a thread. Without investment for rebuilding, the timber business would fail. Workers would lose jobs. Millbrook itself might wither and die. An idea formed as she watched the moon rise. Emma remembered her own careful records, copies she'd made of each week's figures to practice her bookkeeping. Slipping from bed, she pulled out the hidden stacks of paper from beneath the floorboard of her old room above the office. Now, thankfully in their home, not the burned building. By morning, red-eyed but triumphant, Emma had reconstructed most of the business records. As she explained her work to Ethan over breakfast, a knock sounded at the door. Lily ran to answer it, returning with Mrs. Wilson and Sheriff Miller. The sheriff's face was grim. "We found Thomas," he announced, "down by the river. He's dead." A shocked silence filled the room before he continued. "Fell from the bluff, it seems. Must have been too drunk to see where he was going in the dark." "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. The sheriff nodded. "Found this on him." He held out a wrinkled paper, a receipt for lamp oil purchased the night of the fire. "Guess that settles who started it." After they left, Emma sat holding Ethan's uninjured hand. "I should feel something," she said. "Anger, satisfaction, relief, but I just feel sad." "That's because you have a good heart," Ethan replied. Better than he deserved. The Eastern investors arrived on the afternoon train. 3 stern-faced men in expensive suits. Emma watched nervously from a window as Ethan drove them around town in their best carriage. Will Father's business be all right? Lily asked, sensing the tension. I hope so, sweetheart, Emma answered honestly. I really hope so. Hours later, Ethan returned alone, his expression unreadable as he entered the parlor where Emma waited. Well, she asked, standing anxiously. A slow smile spread across his face. They're investing double what we asked for, not just for the timber yard, but for a new sawmill in that railway spur we've been planning. Emma gasped. But how? Without the records. I showed them your reconstructed accounts, Ethan explained. Mr. Harrison was amazed by the detail. But it wasn't just that. He took her hands in his. It was you. Me. When I told him about the library project, about your vision for Millbrook's future, Emma, they want to fund it all. The town's largest investor has a daughter who can't have children. Your story moved him. Tears filled Emma's eyes, happy ones this time. So all this time, what I thought was my greatest weakness turned out to be your strength, Ethan finished. You taught this entire town that worth isn't measured by what society expects, but by what we create with the life we have. The next morning, as Emma walked to the site where the new library would stand, people greeted her warmly. Mrs. Wilkinson invited her to join the Ladies' Aid Society. The banker's wife asked if she might contribute books to the library collection. Mrs. Montgomery called a young woman Emma recognized as Jenny Parker, the doctor's daughter. I was hoping to speak with you. Of course, Emma replied, noticing the girl seemed nervous. I heard what happened with Mr. Grayson, how he rejected you because... Jenny lowered her voice. I have the same condition. The doctors say I'll never bear children. Emma's heart went out to the young woman. And you're worried no one will want to marry you? Jenny nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago, Emma said gently. Your worth doesn't lie in what your body can or cannot do. It lies in your mind, your heart, your spirit. The right person will see that. Like Mr. Montgomery saw in you? Jenny asked hopefully. Yes, Emma smiled. And there are more good men in this world than you might think. As Jenny walked away with lighter steps, Emma continued to the library site. Workers were already clearing debris from an old storefront Ethan had purchased the project. Lily came running up, followed by 3 other children. Mother, can we design special chairs for the children's corner? Sophie has the best ideas. Emma smiled at her daughter, for that's what Lily was now in every way that mattered. The adoption papers had been signed last week, making official what their hearts had known all along. Of course you can, she agreed. This library belongs to all of you. Later that afternoon, a surprise visitor arrived at their home. Mayor Baldwin, who had declined their wedding invitation, stood awkwardly on their porch holding his hat. Mrs. Montgomery, he began formally. I've come to apologize for my previous judgment. This town needs people with vision, with heart. People like you and your husband. Thank you, Mayor, Emma replied, gracious but remembering the sting of his rejection. The town council wants to name the new street by the library after you, he continued. Blackwood Avenue, to honor your contribution to Millbrook's future. That evening, as the family sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and pink, Ethan mentioned a letter that had arrived that morning. It's for my cousin in San Francisco, he explained. She runs an organization helping women who've been displaced, abandoned wives, widows with no support, girls without families. She wonders if we might consider sponsoring some to come to Millbrook. There's work here, opportunity. Emma felt a spark of excitement. Women like me, looking for a second chance. Exactly, Ethan nodded, though none quite like you. He squeezed her hand. You've changed this town, Emma. Changed me. We changed each other, she corrected. All 3 of us. She reached out to brush Lily's hair from her eyes as the girl leaned against her side. As the sun slipped behind the mountains, Emma's fingers touched the key pendant at her throat. her first gift from Ethan. She understood now what his grandmother had meant about it being a key to possibility. It wasn't about unlocking doors others controlled, but about finding the courage to build your own doorways. 1 year after arriving in Millbrook as an unwanted bride, Emma stood before a crowd in a newly completed library. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, lighting up shelves filled with books from floor to ceiling. Children crowded around a special corner with child-sized chairs painted in bright colors. Women gathered near a section devoted to business and education. "Today, we open not just a building of books," Emma announced, "but a house of possibility. Within these walls, we'll learn that our stories are not written by what others say we can't do, but by what we dare to dream." As applause filled the room, Emma caught Ethan's proud gaze from where he stood with Lily, 3 women who had arrived on yesterday's train, the first of many who would come seeking new starts, watched with hope bright in their eyes. That night, as Emma wrote in the leather journal Ethan had given her on their wedding night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come to Millbrook carrying shame for what her body couldn't do. She would build its future with what her spirit could accomplish. Outside her window, Millbrook stretched toward the mountains, a town being reshaped by new possibilities, much like the woman who now helped lead it forward. Emma closed the journal, the words, "the story of us," gleaming in gold on its cover. The story wasn't finished yet, but already it was fuller, richer, and more beautiful than she had ever dared to imagine, not because it followed the path others had mapped for her, but because she had found the courage to forge her own way and discovered her true worth in the process.